Hey guys, welcome to the part two of this Docker demo session. Today, what we are going to do is we are going to look at how to Dockerize a Python application. In our previous demo, we looked at we started from the basics and then we look at how to Dockerize an HTML static application. And these are what we created earlier. This is our Dockerfile. We actually use Nginx as our web server. And then also this is our index.html file, which simplify it's a very basic index.html file that we run. If you haven't watched the part one of this video, I will encourage that you watch the part one of this video before you come to the part two. So without wasting my time, we are going to create another folder in this directory, and we'll name the directory as Python dash demo. It's the folder is currently in the HTML folder, so we're just gonna move it outside and then close this one. Now in this folder, we're gonna create our first folder, which we'll call it we are gonna create our first file, which will be the app. We'll name the first file app.py. And then in this file, this is where we are going to create the Python application. And we are using Flask API to be able to create the application and then Dockerize it. So we'll first of all start by importing Flask in our application. Okay. So let's import Flask. Okay. So from Flask. By the way, I have a video on Python, learning the basics of Python and how to write automation in Python. So you can go and watch that video. I'll put the link in the description below. So you can watch that video, and then you can, if you are confused about anything, just put a comment in the comment section below, and then I'll try and answer your questions as much as I can. So let's import Flask into our project. So in the app.py directory, you're going to import Flask. So import Flask. Flask should be uppercase because, and then also we are going to use the JSON file for responses. Okay, we are not using any API, any real API. So we're going to use JSON file for the responses. Okay, so let's import JSON file as well. All right, so now that we've imported Flask, we're gonna go ahead and then also import a library that we'll use for our HTTP calls, and this library will be the request library. Okay, so like I mentioned, it is important that if you are writing code, you make sure that you comment every line of code, so that when you are not within the organization and somebody comes back to work, somebody joins the organization and want to work on your code, if the person is reviewing your code, the person may not have issues reviewing your code. So let me write a comment here to detail what exactly we. So import Flask framework. So we are importing the Flask framework, and then the JSON file that we'll use for our HTTP, and then also the responses. Okay, so JSON file, for, we're using it for JSON responses. Okay, so we want to kind of like have a JSON response in the browser. Okay, so we are not using any real API, so we're just gonna do a curl and then try and get a response in the browser. That's when we build a Docker, and then the Docker container start running. Okay, so let's and then let's just do responses. Okay, all right, so now that we've imported Flask, I also mentioned that we need to send a request. So we need to import a library, a request library that we'll be using for HTTP calls. Okay, because we are not using any real API, we need this as well. So let's import that. So let me write a comment. Import. So import request library for H to make HTTP requests. So basically that's what we needed in the application. Import requests. And then the next thing that we do after importing the request, so these are the things that we need. We need a Flask framework and then the JSON file because we will be displaying the responses in the browser. We also need the requests to be able to make like HTTP calls. Okay. So this is just a basic application. Now this application, okay, is going to show us the weather of a city. Just basically, yeah, the weather of a city and the degrees of the weather condition in that city. So that's basically what the application will be doing. All right. So the next thing that we need to do now that we've imported flags and then the JSON file for responses, we need to import. We also imported requests. Now the next thing we need to do is to create the flags application. So let me write a comment to create flags application instance. So now we are going to create the application instance, and this, so we have app equals to flags underscore. Let me remove this. So this is the Flags application instance. Okay, remember we are using Flags, so we need to create the application instance. That's what I did here. Now the next thing that we need to do is to define routes. Okay, so just like every application, you define routes where resources can be accessed. Okay, based on the route that you define. And so in this application, too, we need to define a route that will be able to access this city weather details. Okay, so the first route that we are going to define the home route, and then the next thing that we do is also define the resource route. So we're going to define the weather resource route. Okay, so let me write a comment. Define routes. Okay, so define routes for home page. Okay, home page. So in this we are going to use the @. So what is that? Is a decorator that actually maps URL to a particular function, because we will be defining a function and then want to map the route to that particular function. Okay, so we use app.route to brackets, define a string. So this is how you define the home route. Now that we've defined the home route, the next thing that we need to is to define the function, because remember we said that we are using this to map the URL to the function. So now this is our route that we define. Now let's define the URL so that this @ symbol here can map the route to that particular function. So the function will be so in Python, that's how you define a function. So home, then you bring your colon. Okay, so this is how you define a function. And as you can see, this particular @ sign here is what mapping this particular function to the home route. Okay, now the next thing that we need to do is to define the return. So we need to return a JSON response. Remember we imported the JSON file framework so that it can help us to be able to pass the responses in a what, in a JSON format. So what we are going to do here, we are going to define the response. So return, what are we returning? JSONify. So now you are making use of this JSONify here. So JSONify, and then now we want to what? We want to define the message. And what will be our message? So let's define the message. The message is a string. So we can do something like hello from my Flask Docker container. Okay, so we've defined the response. So this is the response that we wanted. Okay, and that is we are returning this particular message in the browser once we go to the home directory. Okay, and remember I mentioned that what we are using this @ symbol here to map this function to this what, to this route. Okay, and then this is what we are returning when we go to this home directory. All right, so now that we create our first API, the next we will do is to okay, so basically there are two things that I want to do here aside the message. Okay, let's make this more a bit what, robust. Okay, so I want to define a message and I want to define the status of to be able to determine the status of the container. Okay, so here what we can do is that we can pass a message here. Okay, we can pass a message here. So you can pass a message here. Maybe I can just leave it in double quotes. It still doesn't matter anyway. Just for uniformity, we can pass it in double quotes. Okay. Okay, so we are passing a message and then also we'll pass the status of the container. So we want to be able to know because so when we go to the home directory, we want to see the message and then also we want to see the status of the container that we are running. So let's pass the status. Let's pass the status of the container. You can say status. So let's pass this message. So you can say container is running. Container is running. Okay. So basically, this is what we want to do. Why was not closed? Was not closed. This was actually closed. I don't know why we have. So message, hello. Well, I don't know. So we've defined our first API routes. We want to define another API route that will basically help us to fetch the city reports or the city weather status. So there are some key parameters that we need in this regard, and those parameters one is the city, that's the name of the city, the temperature, and then the condition of that, whether it is sunny, whether it is raining. We want to pass these parameters. Okay, so let's define our second API. So our second API will probably be define the routes, define route with URL. So URL parameter. URL parameter. So this URL, in this URL parameter, we are gonna return the name of the city. We are gonna return the temperature of the city, and then we're also gonna return the condition, whether it is sunny, whether it's raining. Okay, these are the parameters I'm talking about. All right, so let's start. So we are gonna use the @ symbol again to map the function that we'll be defining to this particular directory. So that's app dot route. Then we open and close. We open and close brackets. Now let's define the endpoints, the API endpoint or the URL. So the first one is the weather. We want to see the weather, and then we are gonna have the city as well. So this should be able to give us the city. Okay. So this is what we are looking for. Okay. And remember, we are not using any real API. So we are just passing. These are hard-coded values. Okay. But the city, we probably need to enter the name of the city. This argument here, we are entering the name of the city. Okay. So let's define the function now. So function. So whether, and then what, city. So we are passing the city in this function. So after we map this particular function to the API route or the route that we define here, we want to be able to get the city. We want to be able to get the weather and then also what, the city. Okay. So now let's return the values that we want to see. So return JSONify. JSONify. Let's do this. Okay. So first of all, we want to see the city, right? We want to see the city. We want to see the city. So this will be the name of the city. So we are passing this argument here. Okay. So that will be the name of the city. Now, the next we want to see is the temperature. So we'll probably have to hard code the temperature. Okay. Let's say the temperature will be 90, okay, 85. Let's do 85 degrees. How do we even type that symbol? Let me see. Probably copy and paste. Okay, so let's just hard code. So what we've done is that we are going to echo the back as the city name in the URL, and then also the temperature. And then finally, what we want to see is the condition. So the weather condition. So what will be the weather condition? You can see the weather condition should be sunny or rainy. Anything goes. So let's say sunny. Okay. So the weather condition is sunny. I haven't closed this. Need to close this as well. Yeah. So these are the parameters we want to see when we go to this URL or this route. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is to write a script that will execute directly. Okay. So we want to define the command that we use to run this particular application. Okay. So let me comment this. So define a command, or let's say command, let's just say application command. This makes sense. Okay. So first we want to write some if statements. Okay, so if, I think this is basically what we are looking for. So if underscore name is equal to main, okay, then we want to run this. So app.run. So we are porting it to what? This particular internet. So this is the internet gateway from all ports. So any inbound traffic, we are not restricting it to any IP. Okay, so the container port will be open to the internet, which is on this particular IP. And so that's what we have. So that's how we are gonna run our application. Let me change the port number to probably something like 8,000. Okay, all right. So now that we finished with the application, let me just go over again. So first of all, this is just a simple Python application. In this application, what we are doing is that we are trying to fetch the weather status of a particular city. Okay. And then we are returning those parameters in the browser. So first of all, we imported, because we are using Flask framework, we imported the Flask framework. And also because we are not using any actual API, we are going to pass everything, the data in a JSON format. Okay, so we need to import the JSON file as well. Now, the next thing that we did was to import the request. So we are going to use the request to make the request library to make HTTP requests, okay, within the application. So we also created the Flask application instance. So this is the Flask application instance. We define the home route, that's the home page route. And then we use this at to map the function that we define here to the route. Okay, so whenever you go to this route, this is what you need to see. So we are returning the JSON file. We are returning this in a JSON format. So first we will see the message that's hello from my Flask Docker container. And then also want to see the Docker container status, which is container is what's running. The next API endpoint or the URL that we defined was the weather, which is basically going to return the city, the temperature of the city, and then the condition of the city. Okay, and then finally we write an if statement here that is basically going to help us to run the application. Okay, I'm not sure why this is. See, something was not closed. This was not closed. Why is this not closed? So let's see if function. Then we return JSON. So we have the message. I'm not really sure what exactly this is complaining because we've actually closed it here. Let me probably delete this and then write it again and let's see what's happening. Yeah. Okay, so not really sure. It's obviously the same thing that we just repeated. So I'm not sure why it says this is not closed. Okay, so now we are done with our Python application. The next thing that we need to create is in Python, we use the requirement.txt file to actually import packages that the application depends on. So we need to create that because we've imported this library and then the Flask framework. We need to also add it to the requirement.txt because the application that will serve as the dependency package for the application. So let's create another file and name it requirement.txt. Okay. So this is where we are going to import those libraries and then framework that we imported in the application directory. So first of all, Flask. We are going to import flags. Okay. What will be the flags version? We can do version. Please, when you are doing this, actually go to the flags website and then get the right version. But I'm just gonna put in a version here, which should also help us to run the application. So 2.3 point, let's say 0 should be fine. And then we also need to import the request framework. Request framework, we can probably do 2.31 dot what 0. Okay, and this should be fine. So I think these are what we need. The first one is the Flags web framework, which we have imported here. We need that package to be able to run the application, and then also the request, which is the HTTP library that we are going to be using to make the API calls for these endpoints that we define it within the application. Okay. So now that we have the requirement.txt file, the next thing that we need to do is to create a Docker file. So Dockerfile. Now in our Docker file, we are going to use an image, which is obviously going to be the Python image. Okay. So we're going to use a very tiny Python image, base image that doesn't bloat our application, because in the future we look at multi-stage Docker file and all of that. Okay. Because we are using just a single stage Docker file, we don't want to bloat our image size. So we want to ensure that we are using the slimmest or the small width Docker base image for Flags. So we are going to do the instructions. So the first instruction is read from, probably do this in uppercase. So from, let's do Python. So the Python, we are using Python. Maybe this should be fine. So you use this base image 3.11 slim. Okay. So that's what we did. Let me bring a comment. Okay. Don't forget, always the comment is very important. Okay. So this is the official Python based image, and it is smaller than the full version. Okay. So always remember to use an official Python image or any official image, base image for any Docker when you are Dockerizing any application, or when you are, let me just put it that when you are Dockerizing any application. So use an official Python runtime as a parent image. I think this comment should be fine. The next thing that we do is to create a work directory. In our previous tutorial, we didn't create a work directory, but this time we are going to create a work directory. Okay. So let me close this. So let's create a work directory, because we want our application to be bundled in a particular location that we can only go there and access, or the container or the application resources. So let's create a work directory. We don't want so you can just do app. So in the container, we'll go to, when the container start running, we'll enter into the container and then go to the directory, so you understand what this actually is doing. Okay. So we can write a comment so that you understand what this is. So what this directory is doing is that so we are setting a working directory in the container. So what will happen is that all subsequent commands will run from this directory. Okay. Every command from the container will run from this directory. All right. So now that we created a working directory, the next thing that we need to do is to ensure that we copy this file. when we are building the application. We copy this file because it contains all the packages and the dependency that the application needs. So we make sure that we copy this file. So in a Docker file, can say copy requirement.tsv file to library docker cache. Anyway, this is also important. The reason why we are copying this file because in a real world setting, this is where you define like all your application dependencies. Okay, like all the packages. So you define it here. So in this case, we need to ensure that we are copying it as part of the container runtime environment. Okay, so we can use the Docker instruction copy requirement.txt. Okay, so we are copying this file. Now that we are copying this file, the next thing that we need to do is to ensure that we are installing those dependencies within this file. We are installing these dependencies. Okay, so install. Can actually just do install any needed package specified in the requirement.here. So we are installing all this. So the command probably the instruction will be run pip install no cache. Okay, so now the no cache, we are going to introduce a no cache. Now the reason we are introducing this no cache is so that basically we don't like save pip cache or reduce the image size. This is not going to install like a bunch of things that we don't basically need. Okay, so we want to ensure that we are not like caching a lot of stuff. So let's introduce no cache and don't create any cache directory in there. So this will help us to be able to reduce the size of them. We are not going to install like a lot of things that will actually affect the size of the Docker image. Okay. And also the R flag here, okay, what it does is simply the referencing the requirement.txt file. And what this is doing is that it's going to install all packages that is listed within this particular file. We are installing all this R flag here is kind of installing all the packages within this requirement.txt file. Okay, so now that this is done, the next thing that we need to do is to now copy all the application files. Okay, we want to copy the Docker file itself. So let's copy the rest of the application file into the working directory. Now we can go with a specific file that we needed, which is the app.py. So we can just copy the app.py file because we need that file. And now we are going to expose the ports that the container will be running on. Okay, so expose ports. So we are using port 8000 in this regard. Okay. Yeah, in the application, we specify the port as port 8000. So we need to use port 8000 here. Okay, so now let's expose that port 8000 and then finally define the environment variable. We don't need to define any environment variable because we don't need any environment variable. The next thing that we need to do is to specify the command that we use to run the application. Okay, so define the command to run the application, and obviously that command will be the Docker instruction cmd, and then Python, and then the app.py, which is this particular. Remember the Flask instance is running here, so that will help us to be able to run this application. So I think that is everything that we needed in this application. The moments of truth, we are going to create a base image for this application and then we'll run it. So to do that, you specify what we call, use a Docker command call. In our previous lesson, we've learned all these things. So if you haven't watched that video, kindly go and watch the part one of this video, the part one of the Docker demo, and before you move on to the part two. So you are going to use Docker build, and then we are tagging the image. So let's tag the image. We can do it app dash flags. Okay, and then specify the directory of the Dockerfile, which is in the root directory of the application. So you can do this. Let's see, error, fail to build, to resolve, fail to read Dockerfile open. Okay, so we are not in a directory where our application resources are. So let me do cd into Python. So let's do ls. So now we can see we have all our. So let's repeat the command again. Python, Docker build. Then let's type the name. The name will be app dash flags. Then specify the directory of the Dockerfile. So let's run. So now our image is being built successfully. So as you can see, the image is being built, installing all the packages that, or the dependencies the application needs to run. So let me move this a bit higher so you can see it is downloading all the dependencies. So the dependency is done. And let's look at the time. You use 22.5 seconds to be able to finish building the Docker image. So let me clear the screen, and then we can do Docker images. So this is the image that we just built, app dash what flags. And this is the tag is latest, and this is the image ID. And you can see it was created for 24 seconds ago. And then the size, which is huge, that's 168 megabyte. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and then run this image. Okay, so we are going to run the image, an instance of this image, which will be the Docker container. Okay, so to run that, we do Docker run. I'm going to run it in the detached mode so that even when we close our terminal, the container will still be running. And then we'll specify the port. So the port that we specify that the application will run on is what? Port 80. Okay. So port 8000. Okay. So we are going to specify the container ports and then map it to the host port, which will also be port 8000. Then we specify the name of the container. Okay, so we can say the name of the container will probably be my flags dash app, and then we'll specify the name of the image. So this is the name of the image. We can copy and then paste, and then let's run so the application, the container is running successfully. When we do Docker ps, So that's the container. So we have two containers running. This was when I was testing this code to make sure that it worked before we go on this video. So as you can see, the image, that's the container ID. The instance of the image is running successfully. And we have the container ID, which is this one. We have the image, which is flags, app flags. And then the command we are using is the Python app.py, and it was what created 10 seconds ago. The status, it was app 10 seconds ago, and you can see the port. So we are mapping it to port 8,000, and then the host port is also 8,000. So in order for us to access this container, we need to go to the routes that we created, or the URL. The URLs that we created, which is this route, API endpoint, this API endpoint. So we can try. All right. So in our previous video, I spoke about this Docker desktop, which enable us to be able to run Docker images locally without necessarily installing Docker on our PCs. So if you haven't watched the tutorials on the first video, kindly watch it so that you understand what role this is playing here. Okay. So this is the image that we just built. You can see the image showing here. When you click on it, it will show you everything that we just stated in the Docker file, which is we stated the base image. So this is the base image. We also stated the working directory. We copied the requirement.txt file. We run this to install the dependencies, and then we copy the app.py file, which is what contains our main application. We are exposing the ports 8,000, and then finding the command to run there. So this is the image. You can see their security. So what this Docker desktop application does, it kind of shows you like details of the Docker image, especially with regards to vulnerabilities and whether the image that you're using is healthy. So you can click on these things and then see the severity of it. And if you need to update your Docker image, you need to update so that all these vulnerabilities will be eliminated from your image. So as you can see there, so but this is tutorial, so it's fine. But in terms of production grade application, when you're Dockerizing a production grade application, it is important that you make sure that the image is free from any vulnerability, and that's where you introduce a DevOps pipeline where you implement security into your pipeline to ensure that all these vulnerabilities are eliminated before you deploy your application to any production environment. Okay. All right. So now we go to the API endpoint to try and run these applications. And the first one that we do is we are going to use curl. So the reason why we are using curl is because in the application we are using, because we are not using any real API endpoint, we are using JSONify to make with request to make this HTTP request. So that's why we are using curl. So curl let's see, localhost, and change the port to ports 8,000. Let's see. Nope, this did not work. Let me try the command again. Curl localhost. I don't know why this is being searched as. Perhaps let me write everything. So it's supposed to be curl HTTP local host, and then the port number is port 8,000, right? We are not doing Google search. I don't know why this is acting up as coming up as Google said, but by the way, let me try it in the command line interface. Okay. So we do curl HTTP localhost and then the port 8000. So this should be able to show us, so as you can see, let me increase this font a bit. So you can see we have the message and then hello from my Flask Docker container. The status container is running as expected. So if you do Docker PS, so you can see this is the container we are talking about, the container status. The container is running. That's about 6 minutes ago. And so it is showing us that what the container is running successfully. Let's also go to the other endpoint so that we can actually get the weather parameters. Okay, the weather status. So this is the other endpoint. So let's do curl localhosts. Then we specify the port number, which is port 8000/weather. Remember, this is the URL. So /weather/ so here we are going to input any city at all. Okay, because of this parameter or this argument here, we are accepting any city. So this requires like human input. So let's first of all, let's start with Accra and then hit enter. So you can see we have the results here, which is 200. So we have the city name is Accra, the condition is sunny, and then the temperature is 85 degrees. Is it far or for, I don't know, maybe, yeah. you can Google it and see, but yeah, so that is, so you actually give us the temperature. So you can see the temperature in Farah. Okay, is it Farah? Yeah, whatever it is, please subscribe and comment the right word in the comment section. Okay, so this is how we are fetching the weather. So we can actually repeat this endpoint and then choose a different city. So let's say Lagos. Okay, and then hit enter. So you can see, so the name of the city is Lagos. Oh, I made a mistake. My spellings, Logos. So let's change this to LA. Yeah, and then enter. So the name of the city, we have Lagos. The condition is sunny. The temperature is 85, and then now these are hard coded parameters, but in a real world application, you have like an actual API endpoint that you are pulling this data from. So you don't need to worry about this being constant. Every day that you, or every hour, every minute that you make a request to that API endpoint, you see that you will see a different temperature, you see a different condition, even though the city might remain the same. Now let's change the city to London. So let me clear the screen and let's change the city to London. Okay. And then hit enter. So you can see the city name is what, London. Condition is sunny. So it is sunny in London, and then the temperature as well. So you can actually input like different cities and have like the same temperature condition as well. So I hope this video has been very helpful. You've understand how to Dockerize a Python application and also create like directory. So now let's come to the work directory that I spoke about earlier. So this is the work directory. Now what we are going to do is that we are going to exec into the container. So let's do docker ps and get a container ID. So this is the container ID that we are looking for. Okay. So let's do, so now if you want to access or enter into any Docker container, this is the command that you use. You use Docker exec and then the IT flag, the container ID, and then based on based on how your or the image that you are using, the bash might change. Okay, so I think mostly if it depends, yeah, just like I'm saying, it depends. So this one, because I'm using the 3.11 slim image, let's try sh and see if it work. Shell script. Okay, so yeah, exactly, we use the shell and we are able to access the container, so we can do pwd to check the directory where we are in the container. So you can see we are in the app directory, which is what we specified was here. We are in the app directory, and then when you do ls, you can see all the, so we have the files that we copied, which is we copied this file, and then also we copied this file. So you can see we have these two files, which is the app.py, this file, and then also the requirement.txt. Now, the other thing is that if you want to like kind of copy all these files at once, you don't even need to use like different copy command. You can just do this copy and then dot dot. Sorry, yeah. Let me just comment this. Okay. So you can also do this, and it's going to copy everything, or I think the other one is dot dot. Yeah. So yeah, so that's basically how like you copy all files that you want to copy. Okay. You don't need to, you just need to like specify the file that you want to copy, and you'll be able to copy everything into the directory. So the command is just, I don't know why it is giving me that, probably because there is this let me do this, let me comment this out so that we can write that. So we can write the copy command. So this is the command I'm talking about. So copy, I think because of the, so we just want to copy like all the files. Say copy requires at least 2 arguments. And these are the 2 arguments. Yeah. So that's how, so if you want to copy like 1, 2, 3, so these 3 files here, without necessarily specifying them like the way we specify, we are copying the app.py and then also copying the requirement.txt. You can actually go ahead and then use this Docker instruction to be able to like kind of copy all those files. Okay. But if you want to be specific about the files that you want to copy, this is how you go about it. And so you have to specify the files that you want to copy, and this will actually copy those files. So when you look at this, inside this container working directory, as we specify here, this working directory that we specify here, I'm talking about this, you can see we copied these 2 files from the application directory, and this is the reason why we have the app.py and the requirement. Yeah, which are like files. So this particular file, the container needs it as runtime. So now we are in the container. We can also check them. So these are, if you write this command, you are basically checking like hidden files. And yeah, so they are not actually hidden files, just the root directory and other stuff. And so yeah, this is how you Dockerize a Python application. You can go ahead and then do other projects on like Dockerizing a Java application, which you can find so many resources to do that. And also, like, then again, here, what we are trying to do here is to share knowledge. So if you have any questions, just put them in the comment section below. I will make sure that I answer your questions. And also, please subscribe to the channel and let's grow the channel together. Thank you for joining this session and bye bye.